Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Greg Peebles, Chief Information Security Officer with UofL Health. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Greg, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Looking forward to having a fun chat. Greg, you want to start out by telling me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Yeah, sure. So UofL Health came from the University of Louisville Medical Center. They had kind of a doctor practice and they had a medical center. And about 5 years ago, they were approached by the state about buying out the Kentucky One hospitals that were owned by CHI.
Hmm.
And so we essentially quadrupled in size then. And obviously that kind of makes a challenge for IT making things all work. But um, they made it past that hurdle, and I joined in March of 22 as a CISO, and kind of trying to then make progress since then.
Very good. So you mentioned you joined in March of 22, so not too long ago. Um, how did you sort of get up to speed and did you jump right into the deep end of the pool? What's it like as a CISO, sort of getting your feet wet or getting I forget the proper expression, sort of hitting the ground running. I don't know.
Yeah,
What's
kind
your
of, kind of.
agenda for the first few months? Like, what are you trying to do?
Well, I kind of look at it as, you need to understand security, you need to understand IT, and then you need to understand the business. And and quite frankly, you're doing those in parallel. So and quite frankly, I'd like to start some of that before even my first official day. What are all the security tools you have? What are the org charts for security, for IT, and for the kind of the leadership of the business? And so it's meet your team. What are they doing? Division of work. What are all the tools? Who manages each tool? Getting their impression of what's working well, what's not. And then you start meeting with the IT leaders as soon as you can. Hey, I'm Greg from security. I'm here to help. What are your top 2 or 3 things? How have you interacted with security in the past? And what issues do you see? And in my 10 years of consulting, did a lot of security assessment engagement. So you're always kind of asking those questions of kind of what best practices do you have? Are there any, pen tests or audits or any of that kind of stuff you can kind of go from? But it's all about, understanding where they're at. Where can you add value quickly? You don't want to go down a rabbit hole of big projects, where maybe you can understand things better, make some have some quick wins, and then look at, taking on those bigger battles later, and then understanding how IT is supporting the business so you understand how your stakeholders are. So I really start with what's security doing, what's IT doing, who are the leaders that can help influence security, and then putting that plan together, and then just trying to put out the small fires that pop up along the way. And there's a few like 90-day plans out there. I think it's all about the same thing. It's how fast can you learn what's there, and figure out how you can add value. And then I like to say, when you talk about policies, for example, make decisions once and execute many. So try not to get stuck in certain processes or challenges, but continue to learn, and let those things that can keep following the existing process go.
So you mentioned that you like to get going even before day one. You want to get in and have an effect. Um, when you are interviewing for a position as a CISO, are there some things that you can find out? I'm sure there are some things that you might want to know that would be inappropriate to ask, sort of inside baseball stuff that you're not going to know till you're part of the team. But there may be some things that you can find out. I don't know about specific technologies or architectures or networks, but certainly, you know, you may say, I want to meet with, well, you got to imagine you're going to meet with whoever you're reporting to, right? But you
Right.
also might say, well, I'm interested in this position, but I want to meet with some of the key people that are reporting to me. I want to know what kind of team I'm walking into. Are there things that you were looking for in terms of figuring out if this place was going to be a good fit for you? Because with security, if it's not thought of as a value add or an important element, if it's thought of as a nuisance, that may not be a place you really want to work.
No, I agree. And, hopefully that comes out in the interview process. You're asking those questions of, hey, what can I be doing? What challenges do you see that I need to face initially? I've had other interviews before I came to UofL Health where, you might meet the team and others where you didn't. At UofL Health, I met with the entire security team, like 30, 45 minutes where they got to ask questions and you're really trying to pull data for them. So what do they think is important and how can you help them? Where do they see as their challenges? And that's a lot of that time it's going to be, we need to expose a spokesperson at the support at the IT level for making decisions or challenging those things. And I think that's an important part of that. So I do like speaking to the team. That's helpful. And when you're speaking to, typically in those interviews, you're depending on who you report to, you'll speak to that person, but then also your peers, typically in the IT arena. So what challenges do they have? How can you help? And are they, perceived to be helpful for security? I think in healthcare, you're in an industry of you're helping people, and I've seen all of the IT leaders want to support you. They may not know how, and they may have conflicting interests, but I do think healthcare is built around people that want to help, and they're good people to partner with. Typically within IT, it's just a matter of finding that middle ground and being able to influence them, and creating that level of trust.
Do you feel like security is in a much different light than it was even 3 years ago in terms of the willingness of the business and IT in general to embrace the changes that you feel need to be made, even if some of them may slightly disrupt workflow or require an extra click, such as multi-factor authentication? Security, to get in there, you want to be as unobtrusive as possible, but sometimes you do have to put something in that people would rather do without. So do you find the reception of that messaging is a little bit better received now that people see ransomware attacks, places down for months? They more understand where you're coming from.
Well, I think so. There's here in Louisville, there's large hospital that we work with frequently that had a security event this summer, and that was certainly in the news when they're down for over a month. That impacts our doctors and all of our leadership when we do business together. Our doctors practice over there as well. So that's influenced at UofL Health leadership. The healthcare organization I was at before here, we were in the process of implementing 2FA. They expected a lot of pushback from a number of users. And I said, well, everybody's been doing this for 5+ years at their banking institutions, et cetera. Our data is no less important than that. So that was, you're looking at those examples to help roll that out. That this is really, their industry expectations and best practices.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that existed even 3 years ago, maybe not 7 or 8 years ago, but that's certainly ramping up that awareness of these events going out there. And even, let's say your average nurse manager is more aware of these kind of things than, let's say, they would have been, 4 or 5 years ago.
Right, right. So what are some of the main things that are on your mind, either trends or things you're watching or things you're working on? What's sort of the big ticket items on your mind these days?
Well, so this is, entirely focused on healthcare. I meet with a group of my peers monthly, so we're kind of in the same spot. And hospitals might be in different levels of maturity when it comes to their business. UofL Health, kind of multiple hospitals that were kind of thrown together, so we have a little bit more process maturity we need to add. But I think we're all facing that challenge of capital and expense. Hey, we want to build new buildings, refresh our buildings, but we also need to update our technical stack. We need, update network equipment, workstations. We may still even have Windows 2003 and 2008, and the hardware is not as expensive as the applications that are on there. So, that level of technical debt and kind of competing for those dollars where in healthcare, you need to have nice offices and that type of thing. So we're competing with those, with other projects for capital where other organizations may think of that as just kind of an ongoing IT update expense.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, people use the term sexy a lot about technology, different technologies, updating different technologies that are seen now as technical debt, which have security risk along with them. That's certainly about as far from sexy as you're going to get, right? But you're talking about how important it is that we upgrade some of the stuff because it's like Swiss cheese from a security point of view. I just can't look at this stuff. I can't have this stuff. We can't have this in our environment. So here's the dollars I need. And I guess it's on you, is what you're saying. That's the art. It's on you to convey the risk, right? You're the chief risk officer in a sense. You are to convey the risk and say, hey, here's the risk. You do what you want with it. But my job is to tell you about it.
Well, and that's like anything. You're doing a project at your house or anything. You really need to clean up your current project before you move on to the next one. Hey, you didn't finish that trim. I might hear this stuff at home occasionally, but it's the same with IT projects. Hey, we had an acquisition. We got them up and running. We didn't take care of their technical debt. We're assuming that. We're going through some of those servers now. It's like, can we even find anybody that knows anything about it, or is it just everyone's afraid to turn it off? And I like to say is if you didn't sit around the right campfire, you don't know the story. And so for me, my job sometimes just keep asking those questions. Who knows something about this server? Let's see what we can do. If it comes down to it, you do the kind of the screen test. But I've developed a quality, I call it positive persistence. I just keep asking questions politely until we make progress. And that's just what you have to do. You can't focus on the technical debt all the time, but you have to have that, make sure you're making progress on those things, as well as looking at new technologies. Hey, AI, business analytics, you can't build a second story on your house if you have a bad foundation. So it's, I'm curious still about the, 90% fundamentals, making sure that, we do what we're supposed to do and make sure we're not doing what we're not supposed to do. And cleaning those up as we kind of look at moving forward with other technologies.
Right. So going back to what you're saying about, for example, the server you referenced, um, and this could happen sometimes, I guess, at the application level too, where, you hear about different things that were homegrown and maybe the person who developed it is gone and nobody knows how to use it. Or you're talking about a server where we don't even know what it's supporting and nobody seems to know what this thing does. And do we just shut it off and see what happens? Is that what you're talking about? Kind of.
Well, yeah, that's the screen test. Does anybody holler? But that's the last resort. No one in IT knows anything about it. And especially when we talk about having acquisitions, this may have been part of one of our hospitals that we acquired 5 years ago, and it was a 10-year-old system then. Maybe the business leader that supported it or used it is not there either. So you're reaching out to the business sometimes and say, who's using this? But, if you've been at the same hospital for 20 years, you may know all those things.
Yeah.
Like where you have acquisitions and people with turnover, just makes some of that, kind of, I call that tribal knowledge harder to track down.
And you want to assign risk to everything. So the server or whatever we're talking about could be sort of benign, right? Or it could be this is something that needs to be taken care of like immediately. So, and that's why you're trying this persistence.
Well, and I talk about these risks in healthcare terms. It's like having malware on an endpoint is like a heart attack. This could get you immediately. Having, 30 Windows 2003 boxes out there are more like a cancer. If you just allow technical debt to keep growing, it'll keep getting worse. Any one machine may be low risk by itself, but if you don't have a process around it, that risk will continue to grow. So they're both risks, but one of them is more immediate. The other, if you do not have process around it, will grow.
Do
And
you
the other
go,
side of it, it's
go
you're
ahead.
picking up IT resources to manage this stuff as well.
Right. Right. Well, those were great sort of analogies, obviously, for healthcare. Do you use those when you're speaking to business leaders or the board, or do you use those kind of analogies with cancer and
I
heart
have used
attack?
those before just to talk about types of risks. So
Yeah.
there's those risks we got to jump on immediately. We've got, somebody downloaded some malware or something on a machine or opened up a fish with an attachment versus having things that we just choose to ignore, like old technologies or applications that have not been updated for a while. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, and the key for someone in your position is to at least know what's going on, right? Because then you can address it. If you've got sort of a heart attack type risk out there that you don't know about for some reason, that's the worst case scenario, right?
Yes.
And that can happen. How does that happen? How can that happen?
Um, so maybe you found out you have subnets that you're not monitoring.
Hmm.
Oh, I I bought this tool. So we have Darktrace, which is an awesome tool for monitoring east-west traffic on our network. But when I first got here, we had what I call a near miss. Someone downloaded a malicious PDF, um, and they had an old version of CrowdStrike on their workstation that that tried to reach out to a foreign website to download something. Our geo-blocking did not work, and Darktrace did not block it going out. It just happened to try to talk to a domain controller. Darktrace caught that, or one of my guys saw that within 2 hours. We shut the machine down, and then we started going through all of those controls, and we learned that, hey, Darktrace wasn't covering all of our workstations. This was when I first started.
Hmm.
So, with every tool, there's two things. Does it do what it's supposed to do? Does it cover what it's supposed to cover? And you're always going back and asking those questions. Okay, you proved it to me 3 months ago. Let's check and make sure they haven't made any changes. So it's like I look at that as fundamentals. It's just the tools that we have. Let's not go buy another tool that we manage poorly if we don't take care of the ones we have. Once we have confidence in our controls, then we can go look at improving some other controls. Last thing you want to do is sit here and say, "Oh, I know we're taken care of," but you learn, oh, well, we haven't updated that in a while, or something's missing. So when we talk about, hey, do we have those subnet covered? It's asking, those kind of questions of, is it really working the way it's supposed to? Taking
Yeah,
away of my fears and doubts.
right. Help you sleep at night. And with these tools, there's sort of two parts, right? There's the vendor's part, like does the tool work properly? Does it do what it's supposed to do? And then there's your part, right? Did we roll it out properly? Are we using it properly, right? So there's two sides of that responsibility, and I guess you want to make sure both parties are living up to their end of the bargain, including your part, right?
Right. Right. And we have a smaller security team. When I was at CVS, we had, probably about 160 people. We're, for the security operations, we're at, 4 people. So we can't be experts in everything. So we have to have good relationships with our vendors.
Hmm.
And we're asking our vendors, hey, if you're going to sell us this product, we want you to, do a best practice assessment, at least every 6 months, help us figure out how do we improve this. Most of our vendors we're meeting with monthly. Hey, what new capabilities do you have? What's changing? What new risks are out there, and how do you protect from that? So, versus trying to be an expert in everything, is we have to have those good partnerships with our vendors. And sometimes it's not always having the best tool according to Gartner, but it's having a tool that you can deploy effectively and will partner with you.
Yeah, and we did a webinar about this recently, actually, making sure that you understand what you're going to have to bring to the table in terms of support to run a cyber tool, right? Because especially when you have a small team, lots of people have small teams. You don't want to take on a tool that needs 6 people to support it, right? No. And that's why a lot of times you want services with the tool these days, right? We'll buy the
Exactly.
tool, but we don't want to have to deal with every alert that pops up. We want you to handle a lot of that or something like that.
Well, and we could probably spend hours talking about kind of vendor relationships and, finding those vendors that support you. The old joke is, yeah, I've got 3 people that work for me and I got 4 people that work against me. We want everybody to kind of move in the same direction, and especially your vendors, as we switched MSSPs, about 6 months ago, and the first vendor was, we were getting alerts, like a week late.
Oh,
They would call us in the middle of the night for something that was a week old. I said, it's either a priority or it's not. If
huh.
it's not, don't call us in the middle of the night. And if it is, call us when you first see it. And that's just, I know growth at the vendors, they have a hard time hiring people as well, but, um, we, I'm a cheap person naturally. So if I'm gonna spend money, I want value for it. And that's kind of my job, is to make sure we keep that relationship. And with them, we keep that dialogue and we're working together. And then what can my team do to be better at working with that vendor?
Very good. All right. I don't know if I'm not sure if you saw this, but so there's some policy stuff going on, right? So HHS just says they're going to come out with these health sector they came out with their introductory strategy for health sector cybersecurity. It's got 4 things they're going to try and move forward on, and they said they're going to release these cyber performance goals. So this is going to come over the next year or two. Um, this may help CISOs, right? Because you're going to sort of have something that you could say we have to do this. I think they're going to make it maybe like meaningful use, where there's some incentives and then penalties. But just what are your thoughts on anything like that? Do you see those things as helpful or as problematic for someone in your position?
Um, I like a lot of what HHS has done, the 405.
Yeah.
There's good information coming out of there. Quite frankly, I think it's probably more geared towards the smaller hospitals that, you know, um, we've worked with a few hospitals that don't have any security staff at all. And so that guidance is probably more geared towards them. However, any of that gets into the eyes of healthcare executive leaders, I think helps us sell that message. There are best practices. I would say this is an industry where um, executive leadership probably has, I hate to paint a broad brush, but seem to be less technical than maybe even, like, let's say, financial services or other industries I've been in, that that and quite frankly, even when you look at regulation, banking, bank examiners have the opportunity to shut you down at any second. Those reviews have a lot more weight than even
Hmm.
HIPAA. They're waiting to punish you after you self-admit something's happened. So I think the regulatory structures from healthcare to other industry, especially financial services, are different, because I spent a lot of time in both. But so quite frankly, I think any guidance like that is probably good for the industry and just keeps us, more often than not, they probably come out as, kind of minimum practices. So
Yeah.
hopefully, if you've been in the industry a while, you're trying to be past that. But it's positive. Can't say that I've looked at all the guidance that's come out in the last few months. I've tried to read up on it, but
Well,
I
you mentioned 405D. They came out with this, they call it Hiccup, is their publication. And so theoretically, it should be, somewhat in line with that. And as you mentioned, if you're running sort of a focused, robust IT security shop, I doubt there'll be anything in there that you're gonna have to scramble to do. I mean, right? It should be things that, okay, yeah, we're doing that, kind of a
Yeah, they should be following best practices. And when you look at NIST or
yeah,
ISO, 80% of it is all exactly the same. So, we should be even
should
HIPAA
be
security rules. So there's a lot of alignment. So that's the best practices. You should be pretty close to that already, assuming you've had any kind of maturity or experience in your security program.
Do you think it's kind of the same thing with the cyber insurance, or do they push you a little further some days with
Yeah,
these?
that's dramatically changed in the last few years. So we were actually able to get a discount because I spent a week working on an 80-page questionnaire. But so you're proving those controls, but they're asking better questions. 4 or 5 years ago, I was getting 2-page questionnaires. Now, they're much more sophisticated, more in depth on best practices. 2 years ago, I did an 80-page questionnaire, and this year they had a like a 40-page IOMT addendum to that.
Mhm.
So, obviously, if our industry is getting hit more, then the insurers need to be more robust in their due diligence.
Are there any things in those questionnaires, the newer ones that are really robust? Are there any things, and you don't have to tell me what they are, but were there any things in there that you said, "Oh, I gotta take care of that," or "We need to get better there," or was it like, "Okay, we're good, we're good, we're good."
Well, no, I can't imagine a security program that can check every box.
Okay,
You're going to have too many people and too much budget for the hospital to actually run. So, you can look at those things and say which ones make sense for us, because I just never been in an environment where you're managing money and resources of people that you can do everything. So you prioritize and say, this makes sense to me. And if they're designing good questionnaires, they are, wanting to cover the entire range where they're probably expecting you to be here. So
okay,
I think the goal is you got to keep getting better. What's the old story is, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun the person next to me.
yeah, I always
So
liked that one.
that's my impression of kind of the questionnaires. They're asking everything. And then if we take a few things out of there and say, oh, the insurance companies really want us to do this, that's, whether it's one thing to have 2FA, for external access, but, do you have 2FA for internal access? So some of those kind of things is, you're having to sell to your entire, internal IT team, your, data center team, et cetera. So those are process changes you have to sell internally.
I saw in your LinkedIn profile that you are a certified ethical hacker. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that's pretty cool. So what is
Uh,
that? Do you
I'll be
hack
honest.
in your spare time at night?
No, I would love to say it. I really came up at, I have degrees in accounting and computer science. I started as an IT auditor, and I said I could find problems where I could fix problems. So I had an opportunity to move into security. And then, wound up doing consulting for 10 years where we do a lot of security assessments and audits. So I wound up in the beginning of COVID, getting a master's degree, and that CEH was actually part of the master's program.
Okay, very good. Do you like to do that penetration testing? Have that done to see where you are? Is that something you?
Yes, yeah. Any outside information I can get. We've had like 3 pen tests, 2 pen tests, and kind of a purple team test with a current vendor that I thought was really interesting, because it's not just finding one hole, but it's also proving controls along the way. So you take this information, it's just another perspective. Um, if as many doors as they can knock on, then we can look at how do we prioritize what we need to do instead of just guessing or looking at sales brochures. We got, attack surface management tool. So we're always kind of looking at that information and saying, how do how do we address those things, making sure that we're getting the right inputs into our priorities.
Well, Greg, we're almost out of time. I
That
found
was
some.
pretty fast.
I was right, a half hour. I'm not going to let you go until I don't know, embarrass you a little bit. I found some fun information about you online. Born and raised in the Bluegrass State, which is very
Yes.
nice. Grew up playing baseball. Played baseball with David Justice. You played in college.
Yeah,
That's
one year in college.
that's
Uh,
pretty cool.
well, interesting thing about David Justice, he went to a high school, a Latin school, and he did not go to the 7th or 8th grade. So he was only 16 when he started college.
Okay.
So he physically blossomed while he was in college and wound up being able to make a pretty good career out of that.
Very good. Like to cheer for your Kentucky Wildcats and Cincinnati Bengals, though the
Well,
cheering for the Bengals has been a little limited towards the
well,
end of the
this year,
season.
it's
Yeah.
funny how 5 years ago we had zero expectations, and now the
Yeah.
bar is raised really high. So they disappointed this year by losing to Kansas City. I have to be a little bit more careful about my Wildcat pride now that
Uh-huh.
a part of UofL Health, which is related to the University of Louisville.
Uh-huh. So much good stuff out there I found, and I never find this on people. You're stuck in the 60s from a music point of view.
Yes, my wife complains about that all the time. Hey, if it was good enough for my older brother, it's good enough for me.
That's great. So you listened to that and you were like, I'm good. This is my
Yeah,
music. I'm sticking
I've
with
got
it.
my Sirius, and I'm listening to the 60s, maybe the 70s sometimes. The what do they
When
call
you're
it?
feeling a little wild, you go to the
Well,
70s.
and where I live, I'm just south of Cincinnati, but
Uh-huh.
not too far to go take a country drive and put on some good 60s music, the Beatles or Creedence or somebody, and just
Love
chill.
it. All right, final question, serious question. Now we get back to serious stuff. Your best piece of advice based on your experience, your career in security, in healthcare, for your colleagues. What's your best piece of advice for them to be successful that you've found has worked for you?
Um, your goal is not to win. Your goal is to make the health system better. So how can you do that? How can you partner with your peers to make it better? We're not here to stop healthcare. We're here to make it better and more secure. So it's really about not winning every battle, making sure you have the right battles, and that you are a partner in making things better and not an impediment. So it's, again, we talk about positive persistence is we want to continue to help. We're an advisor from a security perspective. We're watching the tools in the back end, but all the new business, we're trying to help make sure that it's secure. Big thing that we didn't really even talk about all the risks we worry about, but every healthcare is bringing in hundreds of vendors. And all of these vendors are now in the cloud. So we've got so much healthcare data that's leaving. That's kind of one of the, I guess, growing areas of risk that I worry about is vendor sprawl and, all of that EPHI that's leaving our network
That's
intentionally.
awesome. Yes, you're right. We could go another hour on that, but I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
Greg, absolutely wonderful interview. I want to thank you so much for your time.
Well, Anthony, it was great meeting you, and I appreciate you reaching out on LinkedIn. And don't be a stranger. And then I guess I'll look out for you and other interviews that you have. I'd love hearing from my peers on what they're doing as well.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Okay, appreciate your time.